Working class movements and activists are mobilising in response to the tragic fire that claimed the lives of 77 people in Marshalltown in Johannesburg recently. A public meeting is due to be held at the Library Gardens in the city centre this Saturday morning, and it's calling on all residents, workers, traders, students and community activists to rally government to respond to a list of demands. Let's find out what those demands are with Mametlwe Sebei, the president of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa. Good evening to you and welcome. Tell us more about how this gathering came together.
We met as, key organizations of the labor movement, of the inner city residents, and I think supporting organizations, community civics that have been doing work around issues of housing, around issues of homelessness, but also the conditions of living in many of so-called occupied buildings in Johannesburg. And we decided there is a need for a working class response to what is actually a victim blaming, victim bashing, and of course an attempt to absolve politicians, the city of Johannesburg and various layers of government for the tragedy and of course the crisis of housing that I think led to this tragedy at Marshalltown.
You're really holding the city's various officials' feet to the fire. You're criticizing them for not taking responsibility for those circumstances that led to the deaths of so many people. And you've said, in part, and hopefully we'll come back to this topic, they failed to address an acute housing shortage in the inner city. Tell us more about why you're so angry.
Just look at what is the track record of successive governments of the city of Johannesburg, but also of the province as well, right? Every year, the city population increased by between 130 to 150,000 people. To put that into context, over a period of 10 years, that is equivalent of the size of the population of Soweto. In the meantime, city of Johannesburg built only about 2,500 housing units per year. The mayor, in his wishful thinking, said they can double that to about 5,000. Now, at the current rate of housing construction, it will take them 200 years to just match the level of population growth in Johannesburg. In the most wishful scenario of the mayor, it would actually take them about 100 years. It is that situation that has created an acute crisis in Johannesburg, but it's not only Johannesburg. The whole of Gauteng, about 1.4 million people stay in informal settlement without decent shelter and accommodation. And that is a crisis that speaks to a neoliberal policies of a successive city of Johannesburg, but also Gauteng provincial government. And I think that is the reason that we have this situation where many of the poor people are forced in conditions that are unacceptable, that are incompatible with the idea of human dignity, and we say that they must account for that.
Mametlwe, based on what you're saying now, this is why you want people to understand why urban slums become the only resort for the unhoused. We've heard, we've had many guests, in fact, since that tragedy in Marshalltown, talk to us about, having to transform some of the existing buildings into places that are livable, place some service delivery into those buildings. They may not be, desirable for other people, but for people who are right at the bottom and most exposed, this becomes at least an immediate viable option. Would you concur with that?
We are, of course, demanding refurbishment of many of these buildings. We are saying that the city of Johannesburg must reclaim, in some cases expropriate, this building, to refurbish, to develop them, and to ensure that they provide a decent accommodation for many working class and poor people who have no option but, of course, public housing or homelessness. We are saying that that is not what the government has been doing. If anything, there is indication that there is a complete abdication of responsibility, because some of these buildings are actually owned by the city of Johannesburg, but also there is indication of collusion between some city officials and criminal syndicates that have hijacked this building, that are extorting money from the poor occupants in rental for the buildings and the land they do not own, in tariffs for the services that they do not provide. We are saying that the city is aware of this. There are corrupt officials that are not being held to account. But for politicians that manage the city, it serves them very well that these buildings are abandoned by government in order that they can be absolved from responsibility to provide municipal services that are mandated by the law.
So, Mametlwe, I mean, that last point is really interesting. And every time this has been put to one city official or the other, they say, bring the evidence, bring the proof. And I'm wondering if when you have your gathering on Saturday, that you would be able to provide, as you deliver your memorandum, which has a list of demands to, I imagine, some of the city officials, and you can tell us which ones, that you'll begin to start putting that evidence to them, bring it to the media as well, so that we can follow up with that information. But here's an interesting thing that you're asking for. Government has already constituted an inquiry into this, led by retired Judge Sisi Khampepe. But you want a little more than that. You want an independent, as you term it, working class investigation into the cause of the fire. What would that look like?
We are saying that that commission should also be composed of, working class organizations, as well as movements, and of course, support organizations that have been battling the crisis of housing, have been battling the crisis of homelessness, as well as, of course, supporting people that are trapped in these conditions and have been making submissions, have been doing research, as well as legal representation of these residents of the inner city and, of course, of these buildings. And we are saying that only those people with the knowledge that they've accumulated would be able to make funding as well as provide solutions that will ultimately address this crisis.
Right.
That said, we are going to engage this commission. We are going to prepare to submit the evidence in respect of some of these issues that we are raising, as well as just make a robust submissions around all lot of issues that are arising out of this tragedy and, of course, the housing crisis in general.
Well, thank you for telling us all about it. The rally kicks off at Library Gardens on Saturday morning at 9. Mametlwe Sebei is the president of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa.